Okay, welcome to Rock Docs Season 1 wrap-up. I'm David Lizerbram, here with my co-host.
Andrew Keatts.
Andy, we did it.
Heck of a tour.
They said it couldn't be done.
We gave them something to talk about.
Yeah, this is the Season 1 wrap-up of Rock Docs. For those of you who've been following along, for those of you who this is your first episode, boy, you picked a weird one, but sure. Cool. This will just consider this a preview for Season 1 that you can go back and listen to.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we just kind of want to talk about a few, kind of run down what we did this season, talk about, a few of our thoughts about it, maybe some errata or, apologies or whatever.
I have a few mea culpas I'd like to offer. Yeah, I've got notes on my own performance.
Yes, exactly. I think maybe we'll start out by some thank yous.
Yeah.
Want to definitely thank, first of all, NC Winners, who did our logo and Above and Beyond. Super awesome. Whatever you think of the podcast, the logo is very good.
You know what? If you have made it through this whole season, you've liked all the episodes, hit me up on Twitter. We've got some stickers of the logos. I'll put one in the mail for you.
There you go.
All right.
Andy will drop a stamp.
At Andy_Keatts, Keatts. Shout me out. I will mail you a Rock Doc sticker.
Yeah. And we also don't often say, or often enough say, that we are, in fact, on Twitter and Instagram at RockDocsPod. So you can certainly interact with us if you're, missing your weekly fix of Rock Docs. We're out there. We're sharing important Rock Docs news.
During the time off, I am certain we'll be watching Rock Docs. So if you are too, hit us up. We can do a little impromptu version of the show.
We also want to thank all the other people who gave up their valuable time. Well, first of all, I want to just personally shout out Scott Riggs, who's a friend of ours, who's a professional podcast producer who has worked with like Questlove and big important people who are not us. And he's been very generous with his time and help and technical help. So thank you, Scott, if you're listening. Much appreciated. And if anybody out there does actually need to hire a real, actual professional podcast producer or consultant, hit us up. And we'll get you in touch with Scott. All the people who've been on the show.
Yes.
Christine Vachon, the producer of the Velvet Underground doc.
Mm-hmm. Garrett Price, the director of the Woodstock 99 doc, which I don't know if you've checked out that bonus episode yet. I thought that was great. I thought he was really forthcoming and actually made me want to go back and watch the movie again.
Yeah, it gave like definitely a different perspective, and you could see the thought put into it. So that was really cool. We also had Jeff Terich and Candice Renee on the episode Hype about Seattle grunge. And
if you enjoyed that episode and their performance on it, which gotta say they brought the vibes. They brought a very ungrunge-like,
highly professional,
highly enthusiastic performance. If you like that, check out treblezine.com. They got a Patreon. Kick them some money. Great music critics.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Rob Mitchum, who came in kind of the closer, came in the last inning, locked it down.
Yeah,
talking about Fish and Bittersweet Motel, and his podcast 36 from the Vault is great.
Yeah, and if you have enough money that you want to pay Rob to produce or direct, I don't know what his directorial chops are like, his version of Bittersweet Motel, the Mitchum cut, hashtag release the Mitchum cut of Bittersweet Motel.
Exactly. Yeah. If we could get another cut of Justice League, and the world was demanding that, we could certainly get another cut of Bittersweet Motel. It's got to happen.
I mean, with what's gone on with Get Back, there's a whole new rethinking of what to do with all this archival footage. Let's start with taking Todd Phillips's warehouse of footage filmed on the 97-98 Fish tours. Let's put it in the hands of Rob Mitchum. He already sketched out his view of the superior film. Let's make it happen. All these streaming services are apparently hungry for content. I don't see why they wouldn't want this.
Okay, that's enough about that. Let's see. We were going to kind of go episode by episode. Before we do that, do you want to go on your apology tour?
We can do. I have an apology on 2 specific episodes. So as we go through each of those episodes. I'll get to them there as well.
All right, let's just kind of do a quick scan of what we did. We started out with Rolling Thunder. Say it with me, everybody. Rolling Thunder Review, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese.
That's right.
Certainly the longest title. Well, no, I don't know, Woodstock 99, but a long title, let's say.
Yeah, if you count the music box portion of Woodstock 99, it might be the dreaded 2: title.
All right, Rolling Thunder Review. What stands out to you about that movie at this point?
What stood out to me at the time, and what we talked about a lot in the episode, was the creative flourish of Scorsese to write in some fictional characters. And that is not what stands out to me now. And in fact, I kind of wish that I hadn't gone on and on about it quite so much in that episode, because I do think it distracts from how good the rock doc content is. I mean, it's unavoidably part of what makes that movie interesting, but not so interesting that it should dominate the discussion to the expense of like just incredible concert footage of Bob Dylan at like one of his peak periods.
And backstage footage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will still stand up for Van Dorp and the Sharon Stone business and everything. I find that enjoyable, having now spent the better part of the last 3 months watching various rock docs intensely over and over again. I kind of still appreciate the whimsical nature of that one.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not, necessarily giving you what you expect, on the package.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun, and we've got plenty of rock docs that play it a little more straight.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that stand out, I would say, is certainly Joan Baez getting funky.
Yes.
Never going to forget that.
We'll never forget that. And so maybe this is a good time to revisit this one standout performance from Rolling Thunder Review, one Scarlett Rivera.
Yeah.
Who we expressed utter fascination with.
Yes.
And who, in the time since, I have seen perform live.
That's right.
I caught Scarlett Rivera. And this is like a rock doc stew, what I'm about to tell you. Yeah. So
this is like all the rock doc stuff coming together. This is like Thanos Infinity War of rock docs.
Yes.
The rock docs extended universe.
Yeah, this is like a Marvel DC crossover event in the rock docs cinematic universe. I went and saw a local band here in San Diego called Mrs. Henry. A couple days after Thanksgiving, they put on a Last Waltz concert where they invited predominantly Southern California musicians to come up in the style of the Last Waltz, where each one comes and does a song or two, just as in that performance, and each person kind of did a different bit. So Last Waltz is a rock doc. So there's one rock doc connection there. Two, Jack Temchin, who wrote Take It Easy or Peaceful Easy Feeling. I can't remember which, but was a longtime collaborator with the Eagles and is featured heavily in the history of the Eagles documentary. He performed at that concert, played the Neil Young part in the Last Waltz.
Now, did he have the authentic Neil Young Coke booger?
He did not have the Neil Young Coke booger or the cocaine jaw. He did have a harmonica, and he sat down, and at the end, when they did I Shall Be Released with the entire every musician on stage at the same time, he stood comfortably off to the side doing his own thing, very uninterested in partaking in the revelry.
Okay.
So that was
Scarlett Rivera.
But Scarlett Rivera, the highlight of the thing was Scarlett Rivera, and she came out and she did like five or six songs probably. She did all of the Dylan section. They had multiple different people come out and do different Dylan parts, but she was up there for all of that. It was fantastic. And
Playing the violin.
She sang backing vocals a little bit, but she mostly played the violin. Had a bemused expression on her face.
Okay.
Seemed like she was kind of like, okay, I guess this is cool. But, she was on the Rolling Thunder Review, so it was probably a cooler experience for everybody else there than it was for old Scarlett Rivera.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, when I got ready to go to that show, and I saw that after we had been so excited to discuss this peculiar figure, Scarlett Rivera, Sure enough, she was at that concert. So
Was
there
she
you go.
given the same vibes, the same kind of like hippie flower vibes, like or?
Yeah, although
give
she's
me a picture.
40 years older now.
Well, yeah, sure, okay.
She
but I'm
had
just talking
very
about-
long hair. She was very long like red hair, like scarlet red hair. Still, she still ripped on the violin. Just absolutely,
she hasn't
ripped on
lost
the
her
violin.
chops.
Has not lost her chops. She, we might be able to extend an invite for her to be on the show.
Okay.
She's got a
friend of the podcast, Scarlett Rivera.
She's got a promoter. I saw her contact information. So I gather she must be Southern California based. Every other musician I was able to place was either from as far away as Long Beach or mostly in like Encinitas, North County area.
Okay, so this local bar, the Belly Up at which you went to the show, wasn't flying people in from all points of the globe.
I don't think so. No. I think so. I think she's. I think she might be from San Diego County, interestingly enough.
Interesting. Okay. Some local connection there for our local listeners. Okay. All right. So let's just kind of keep on rolling here. Dig.
Yes. So I asked a couple people who I knew had been listening to the show if they had any questions for me. One was whether we are surprised that Anton is still alive.
Okay.
So what do you think? What do by way of your reactions to the show? What do you make of Anton's continued musical output?
For those who've been following along, and this is in the distant memory, Dig was the early 2000s vintage documentary about the 1990s exploits of two bands, the Brian Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols. Anton was the lead singer and is the lead singer of Brian Jonestown Massacre, and he was a volatile, drug-addled. Let's just say the film makes him look like a bit of a maniac. Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the movie in 2003 or 4 or whatever, would I have predicted that Anton would still be, living and apparently thriving in 2021-ish? I don't know that I would have put a lot of money on that, but yeah.
But also, I think we said on the show, who knows, maybe they captured him at his worst, and maybe that's the case. Also, most people have that period of their lives and that period of his life.
Certainly rock musicians.
Yeah, they don't necessarily continue that through their 40s.
Yeah, but they're touring. I may actually go see them next year.
Yeah.
Or 2022.
Yes, I'm excited.
We're recording this in late 2021, but it's coming out early 2022. So, whatever. Okay. So, yeah.
Now that documentary, I would say, I watched it in preparation for the show for the first time. I think I watched it 2 or 3 times by the time we recorded the episode. I've watched it 2 or 3 more times since then, and I'll probably keep watching that movie at a pretty healthy clip for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That is now like solidly in my Rock Docs rotation.
It's like 90 minutes of all killer, no filler.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Joel Guion.
Here's a mea culpa. Here's a mea culpa. Candace Renee, who was on the Hype episode, tweeted at us that we neglected to include the early 2000s acting careers of both Courtney Taylor and Joel Guion.
Okay, what?
Do you
I don't
this?
know about their acting careers. Break this news to me right now.
So Joel Guion, I need to.
Okay, while you're pulling this up, I'm just going to say Joel Guion. First of all, just for the eyebrows alone, but the animated presence that he brought, and at least according to the film, the lack of real role he played, other than just cool dude in the band. Huge respect to that. Just a great all-time rock doc character, and I think we concluded that in the rock docs tradition of heroes and villains, the villain of that film, the antagonist to some extent, has got to be Anton Newcomb. He's also the protagonist, but certainly the antagonist. But Joel Guion is as a sidekick, just brings it.
Yes. So Joel Guion was in Gilmore Girls.
Oh, okay. I think I knew that.
Had a. I don't know. I didn't watch Gilmore Girls, so unfortunately, I wasn't in a position to have called on this fact. And now this one maybe
he was in Gilmore Girls in an episode, or he was regular.
I think he was a regular.
Okay, I'm not placed. I did watch Gilmore Girls. I'm not placed in this. Sebastian Bach was a regular,
and then Courtney Taylor was a regular in Veronica Mars.
See, I never saw Veronica Mars, so there you go.
Filmed and takes place in San Diego.
Okay, there you go. So I'm next during my next Gilmore Girls rewatch, I will look out for Joel Guion. That That's good info to know.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he was only in
Uh,
2 episodes. He was in 2 episodes of Gilmore Girls.
Yeah. So okay, dig. Moving on, our next episode was Tina,
Yes.
about Tina Turner.
I think that one holds up pretty well. Don't have many regrets. I agree that the music of Ike and Tina, although certainly plenty of other things about Ike have not, the music of Ike and Tina has aged well and deserves to be more heavily featured in playlists from that era. Needs to be more prominent in the memories of that era of rock and roll.
I mean, no doubt about it. If you're, digging into, rock, soul, R&B history, and you enjoy, Otis Redding, James Brown, that kind of thing, if you're just digging on that, you might not have occurred to you, to steer into Ike and Tina Turner, but please do. Because it is so good. We make a playlist for every episode. If anybody's following along at home, we post those playlists on various social media, and the playlist about the Tina episode, which is just mostly Ike and Tina content, it just kills because they covered in those days. People would just cover stuff. It's a lot of songs you already know.
Yes. From
contemporary rock acts and all different types of artists, and if they covered your song, forget about it. Like you why even bother doing it? Because Tina Turner would just destroy it.
Another reflection on that episode, Nick McCann reached out to me, listener, and said that he recalls how significant the Tina Turner story was, the extent to which it played out on Oprah. And the movie does get into that a little bit. We didn't really get into it much at all.
Yeah,
but
Oprah is in the documentary.
In the documentary, but the amount that her story was like just in the language of suburban America, I think owed to how much of it played out on Oprah. Not just the movie, which and the book. It was a best-selling movie and it was a best-selling book.
Right.
But Oprah was just so huge at that time period, especially with like suburban moms, that like Tina Turner became
the go-to,
like an icon for like female empowerment, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think now looking back, 20 years, it's kind of like Oprah's a celebrity and she's a famous person and her face is still in news, on the stands when you're buying your Cheerios or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cultural dominance of Oprah in the like
late 80s, mid 90s,
80s, and that 10-15 year period was it's hard to overstate. I just don't think anybody is like that now.
No.
There's people who have like 100 million Instagram followers, but it's not quite the same.
No. Yeah, watching Oprah for a lot of people, women especially, was like going to church.
Yeah, that's like the deal.
Yeah.
I definitely Ike Turner, certainly a villain.
Yes.
Not afraid to say that.
Not afraid to say that.
Yeah, I think that's
fine.
That's Tina Turner. Beats, Rhymes, and Life: The Travels of a Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Directed by Michael Rappaport. Let me just say, a little behind the scenes here, I've reached out on social to Michael Rappaport to see if he'll talk to us about this documentary.
Yeah.
Total silence.
Maybe
he just doesn't care for the documentary.
You're the only person he hasn't responded to on Twitter.
Yeah, literally
That's all he does on Twitter is flame people that tweeted him at all. And here we are trying to be nice. We can't get a response.
I think of our episodes, this was the one with the most love.
Yes.
Like if I would describe the emotion that you and I were feeling when we were talking about that documentary, it was love.
Yes. What I do not love is my comparison to the Eagles. Just don't think it coheres.
Okay,
Doesn't hold.
This is another mea culpa.
Here's another mea culpa. Yeah, if you're keeping track. I think what I was getting at was simply the level of tension in the band is comparable to the Eagles, who absolutely hated each other. Now, the members of A Tribe Called Quest did not hate each other. That's the first problem. This other problem was you asked me, you were like, okay, draw out this metaphor. Who's Glenn Fry in this situation? And I said that it was like Fife and Q-Tip were like Fry and Henley, and that's not right at all. The central conflict in the Eagles was mostly Glenn Fry and Don Felder.
Right.
And the Henley-Fry feud is more like comes a little bit passive-aggressively going into the 80s, but mostly was not present through the 70s when they were actually in a band. It was more of them being part of like a coordinated front against the other band members. And
Okay,
so
so
it's
we're
not
eventually
the
gonna talk about the
parallel.
history of the Eagles.
parallel doesn't work well.
Okay.
And I would just like to say to the many people who reached out to me to tell me that analogy didn't hold up, you're right. It wasn't a good one. Okay. All right.
That said, other than that,
Yeah.
I look back fondly on that episode. That movie is awesome.
That movie rules. Yes.
All four members of Tribe Called Quest, after watching the documentary, are my favorite member of Tribe Called Quest.
yes.
But certainly Fife Dog. Boy. I mean, just much love for that guy.
So I also was told that there was at some point a Fife Dog sports talk program in the works. That there was, we mentioned on the show, like, how in the world did he never get a sports talk segment of some kind? And apparently there were people asking him that question at the time before his death. And there was like an early proto, like, I guess it wouldn't have been that early at that time, but before the true explosion of podcasts, he had been working on a Fife Dog sports talk podcast that never quite took off. So we weren't the only people who thought that was good content.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it's a shame we didn't get that. It's like, I mean, that's like, the Eagles or the Beatles breaking up. Like, we could have had more greatness, but
if he had like done like 15 episodes and there was like weird episodes of Fife Dog talking about the Cubs pennant run or something,
yeah,
I would go back and listen to that now. Like, what were Fife Dog's thoughts on whatever was going on in sports in the summer of 2013? Would be, I would love to listen to that right now.
Yeah. If anybody,
like totally outdated, like the just the topics of the day, but from 8 years ago.
I'm just going to manifest something right now,
yeah.
Which is Fife spent a lot of his unfortunately cut short life talking about sports.
Yeah.
So if you've got a recording, if you videotaped or cassette taped or with your phone or somehow or the other recorded Fife talking sports,
get it out there.
Put it on YouTube and shout us out or something, because
call the Library of Congress. I don't know.
Exactly. This needs to be heard.
Yes.
Don't bury it. If you've got a video cassette, find a way to convert it.
We're recording history here. This is an oral history. You just, it needs to be out there.
Yeah. I mean, just like thinking about that movie, like there's that scene where they're rehearsing for like the kind of comeback tour, and there's this little just scene where Fife and Q-Tip are just practicing these dance moves.
Yeah.
Because when Tribe Called Quest would perform, it'd be like mostly they're just hanging out, rapping, and then like they'd kind of at certain points just break into a little dance, and then kind of edge out of it a little bit. But it didn't happen by accident. Like, there's a little scene of them rehearsing, Fife and Q-Tip, and they're not that passionate about it. Like, you can tell they're just kind of like, all right, we got to kind of cut this down so we can get it, right when we go on stage and we look cool and whatever. But there's just like a history in that moment of like these guys that have, grew up together, and they're kind of coming back, and they're kind of running through the motions, but they also like, they know it so well. They communicate so well, and they this just way of being is so natural for them that for some reason that moment just like always stands out. When I think about that documentary, that's the moment that pops into my head.
Do you think we had a very much take that like there was no one at fault to the tension, and in fact the sources of the tension were opaque, and that they both came off good? Both Q-Tip and Fife Dog came off. I think there's a popular view out there that Q-Tip comes off poorly in this movie as being insufficiently supportive of Fife Dog, who's going through serious health problems, and that he's even kind of an asshole to Phife Dawg. I still don't see it, and I watched it again through trying to like pick up trying through that lens to see if I was missing something, and I still really don't see it all that much. But I don't know. What do you think? Did we miss the sources of tension between Q-Tip and Phife Dawg, and specifically Q-Tip being a bit of an asshole?
Yeah, I feel like my feeling about it was this was all about their kind of reunion tours or shows when Phife wasn't in good health.
Mm-hmm.
Jarobi was brought along to like kind of support Phife in many ways, and I think Q-Tip, my sense is that he felt a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's the biggest star. He's a recognizable name. He's, he has to perform knowing that Phife might not be up to it on any given night. So he has to deliver.
Yeah.
And, make the crowd not even notice like anything that's going on with Phife. So I don't know that I certainly don't fault him. I mean, he could definitely come off like an egomaniac,
mm-hmm.
but this is all on a scale of like, compared to any other rock star or superstar rapper.
Yeah.
He seems pretty chill.
If I risk venturing to a different analogy.
Okay.
Is it more Robbie Robertson, Levon Helms like?
Okay.
Where, like, I think when you first are exposed to the band, you're taught that Robbie was the asshole.
Right.
And he stole too much songwriting credit from Levon Helm. He's the one who wanted to end the band. That ended up leading to the death of Richard Manuel. Levon Helms never forgave him, right? And then I think now there's like a lot more people willing to be like, well, I kind of see where Robbie was coming from. He had a wife and a kid. He was trying to live a normal life. The way they were living on the road was untenable. And maybe if he was an asshole, he was an asshole in a way that you could understand because everybody else was doing drugs all the time and he wasn't into heroin like the other guys were, and somebody needed to like finish the song and get it written and put it on a record and have a band, and that there's like this like older adult view that maybe Robbie Robertson was unfairly maligned. Is that a viable parallel to draw between Q-Tip and Phife?
Yeah.
You don't seem convinced.
No, I mean I see it. I get it. But I don't know, man. I'm not really looking for a parallel. I'm just hanging out with Q-Tip and Phife, man.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder. Everyone seemed the critical response to that movie was that Q-Tip came off looking bad, and I just don't really see it.
No, I don't feel like Q-Tip comes off looking bad.
Yeah,
he's a little bit of the Paul McCartney.
Yeah, a little bit, but I guess that's a good example too, because I find that like people saying that Paul McCartney comes across looking terrible in Get Back to be strange to me as well. I mean, he's certainly controlling, but somebody has to be. Yeah,
he's trying to like let it be,
right?
So knock it off, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot about Beats, Rhymes, and Life.
Yes,
but we loved it. But another one that we loved was Zappa.
Yes.
I called it surprisingly emotional, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I definitely stand by that. That for a character who can seem remote and definitely like an asshole, if you're looking for somebody who definitely at times could come off that way, it's such a warm, loving documentary. And I mean, what stands out for me when I think about that movie is Ruth Underwood, who played with Zappa and like worked with him for years. Barely got a nice word from him.
Yeah.
And yet is so affectionate and has so much warmth towards him that like she literally breaks down crying in this movie talking about him 30 years after his death or whatever.
And she just seems so happy to be talking about him.
Yeah.
Like even just having a camera pointed at her so she could talk about her life with Frank.
Right.
Seemed like bringing Frank back for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the music of Frank Zappa is sometimes, I guess, people consider it like music for weirdos who don't have any feelings or just like weird music. And it's, like you said, just put it on, just throw it on. It's good music. And if you don't like it, fine. But don't be so intimidated by it. And yeah, I think the movie really, I think clearly the intention was to humanize this person while also telling his story in a pretty frank, but in a pretty straightforward way, not playing around the edges, but still, show the emotional core there. And I think very successful.
Yeah, I like the movie a lot. I still do. Just, I would like to have spent a little bit more time, even in the late 60s, but especially in the early 70s, seeing more music and seeing more of the scene around them. Just because I think it's underappreciated the extent to which the 60s happened in the 70s, and that when people were actually being what we think of as the 60s in the 60s, that they were there very early.
Right.
And so for somebody like Frank and the Mothers of Invention or Velvet Underground or Grateful Dead, they're like early years, like that was an antisocial thing to be doing.
Right.
It was not something that every high school kid was able to like go steal off and go to a Mothers of Invention concert.
Yeah.
And so like I wanted a more of a view of how outside of the culture what they were doing was at that time.
Right.
How experimental it was. And then how different they were even from the scenes that were going around them. Like
right.
He's playing presumably a couple days apart or probably on the same bills with like the Doors, who were like thought of as like a freak band, but like the Doors were down the middle.
Right.
Compared to what Mothers of Invention were doing.
Yeah.
In the same city at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of for those of us who didn't live through the 60s or 70s, more or less. That's kind of partly what Mad Men taught us.
Yeah.
Was that like the 60s was mostly the 50s.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
My parents were born in 47 and 49.
Yeah.
And they grew up, in the 60s as, teenagers and young people.
Yeah.
And, the music they liked and they continue to like was, between my mom and my dad, Elvis, early rock and roll, Chuck Berry, stuff like that, doo-wop, the early Beach Boys, the early Beatles.
Right.
And then as you go a little bit later, and my dad loved and still loves Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then going along a little bit later, Motown. They love Motown, which I think is probably the most underrated. You hear about Motown, but I just don't think, they get enough respect for having produced like hundreds of awesome songs.
Right.
They weren't hippies. They weren't into that whole, they weren't going to Woodstock. There was a Woodstock in 1969. We know about Woodstock 99, but there was another one before that. So I think that is a good point. Is they kind of don't really touch on that. The 70s. That's the only thing I would knock about the movie too.
Yeah,
Zappa is that they kind of blow through the 70s, which was probably his most fertile artistic period, probably his most commercially successful period. And so maybe that's why it's like, well, people already know that story, but most people don't.
Most people do not, yeah.
I know that story because I'm a nerd who likes Frank Zappa, but, I just, I guess I can see why it was skipped over, but it's, anyway, if we get the Alex Winter do the director's cut of that movie, the 4-hour version of the Zappa movie where you get more into the 70s, I'm there for that.
Yeah. Briefly also, we mentioned in that episode that Lowell George, the frontman for Little Feat, was briefly in the Mothers of Invention.
Yes.
And this is not mentioned in the movie.
Yeah.
Although it played a large role in Lowell George's musical life.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't actually tell the story.
Right.
Which is sort of an interesting rock and roll story.
Well, that's why we're here.
So the Lowell George, Frank Zappa story, there are two explanations of how Lowell George came to leave the Mothers of Invention that I have come across. One seems far, far more plausible to me than the other. Do you know both of these or either?
Lay
of
it
these?
on me.
All right. So Lowell George is in the Mothers of Invention. He had been doing his own thing for a little while. He'd been playing with them a little while. And he comes in one day and he plays Willin'.
What became Little Feat's hit song.
Also recorded by Linda Ronstadt. If you only know one song by Little Feat, you probably know Willin'.
You've probably heard this song even if you don't know the name.
Don't know Little Feat, yeah, exactly. And Frank Zappa tells him in one version of the story, "You're too talented to be in somebody else's band. I'm kicking you out of the band because you need to go it alone, kid.
Okay.
You're so good." Now, does that seem like something Frank Zappa would say to you, say to anyone about Willin' or about anything?
Yeah, I think if Beethoven was playing piano in Frank Zappa's band and he's like, check out, Beethoven's Fifth, da-da-da-da, Frank Zappa would be like, that sucks.
Yeah, exactly.
Play what I'm telling you to play and shut up.
Yeah, so that's one version of the story that I just find flatly implausible. The other version is that Zappa walked in on Lowell George smoking pot one day and kicked him out of the band because he hated hippies and he hates drugs.
Highly plausible.
That seems far more likely to me about the story that Lowell George was kicked out of the Mothers of Invention.
If I have to pick one, that's the one. But yeah, maybe Alex Winter again when you get backify this movie and make a 4 to 8 hour version of it, we can get into the Lowell George business. But okay. Rolling along, Hype, which was our first episode with very special guests.
Yes,
Candace and Jeff. It's a documentary released in 1996 about the Seattle grunge scene from the 80s to the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us had seen this before we talked about it.
No,
before we prepared for the.
I have likewise seen this like 2 more times since that episode aired. This will be in my steady rotation.
Okay.
Great movie.
Really good. Definitely, I'm not recalling his name, but the guy who is being Mr. Cool Guy by slicing up vintage 80s proto-grunge band posters and
talking about how valuable and rare they are.
This is worth $200 now, man, and cutting it up.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm calling him a villain, but I almost maybe feel like he's a hero.
It's hard to say. He's a Tony Soprano figure.
Yeah, he's an anti-hero.
He's an anti-hero.
Yeah, the era of the peak TV anti-hero.
Yes, that's right.
No, but he stands out.
Yeah, he was great. I think. What did you think of the Eddie Vedder talking head segments in that movie?
I mean, he's a little guarded.
And he's like deeply insecure, it seems like.
Yeah.
It's like they never I don't know if I can't recall if I mentioned this in the episode, but I kept waiting for the like fuck Eddie Vedder sentiment to come out. Cuz he's not from Seattle. And
he's from North County, San Diego.
And Kurt Cobain always kind of had some bad things to say about Pearl Jam in general. He ended up saying nice things about Eddie later on, thought he was a very nice and interesting person, but he had over the course of time said some pretty disparaging things about the band. And the story of Green River breaking up and becoming Mudhoney, half of the members creating Mudhoney and half of the members creating Mother Love Bone, which then became Pearl Jam. The story I'd heard about Green River breaking up was that basically they were playing a show in LA and Jeff Ament was giving all their backstage passes to like industry people and was talking about what a opportunity this was for them and that it was time to hit it big and that they had a real split over how commercial they wanted it to be.
Right.
And that Mudhoney became the authentic grunge band.
Right.
And Pearl Jam became the personification of like the hyped grunge band.
Yeah.
And so throughout that movie, as Eddie Vedder comes in, I'm sitting there waiting for some of the other characters to start slagging off Pearl Jam.
Right.
And Eddie Vedder seemed so insecure to me in his segment. But then it never goes that way, and they never do that at all. They never hint towards that. That punch never comes. It's like no one even expresses any sentiment towards that. And so I wonder if I put all that on them based on like the selective reading of what I know about the era. Well,
the movie never really details that history. It's like it's not important.
Right.
I mean, even if you were like following this stuff kind of in real time, like, when grunge broke and when Pearl Jam and all these bands come out, I remember reading in Rolling Stone or whatever, Mojo, whatever else, or seeing stuff on MTV News at the time, like, okay, there was these bands, Green River, and then Mother Love Bone, and Andrew Wood died of heroin overdose, and this happened and that happened, and they gave this tape. They had this tape circulating around where it was just riffs, and it got to this kid, Eddie Vedder, in San Diego, who was like a surfer, and like he, listened to the tape in his car, and he went surfing, and by the time he like came back, he had already like, written 3 of their Black or Alive or, whatever, just, it was just meant to be. And this whole story was like so seminal at the time. It was so important, and it was just not addressed in the documentary, which I almost feel like the documentary was like telling you the real behind the scenes story, meaning it wasn't like they weren't trying to rehash the stuff that everybody at the time the documentary was made in the 90s already knew.
Yeah.
Like if you cared at all to see this documentary, the presumption was, well, you already know about the story of Nirvana, and you already know about the story of Pearl Jam and all the bands that kind of grew from that, and we're telling you the other stuff. But now looking back, it's like, well, you got to kind of refresh people, but that wasn't the intention when the movie was made.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's well said, and I think they're more interested in telling the story of the scene than they are telling the story of like 5 different bands in the scene.
Yeah. Now Mudhoney, they're still around. I mean, of all the bands, I mean, Pearl Jam obviously is still around and, doing quite well for themselves. But, most of these bands, like, most of the people are, either the bands broke up, they're not around anymore, or whatever, they're kind of whatever. Mudhoney's still around. Mark Arm, the lead guy from Mudhoney, lead singer, he is, I recently heard, the warehouse manager for Sub Pop Records. So, like, he, works with, I don't know if he's, like, what exactly role he's doing as the warehouse manager or how many employees they have, but, like, if you order, a whatever, Mother Love Bone record from Sub Pop or, one of their contemporary acts, like, he's the one who's making sure that record's getting to you, and then he goes and tours with Mudhoney from time to time, and they record an album. They, like, have an album out, like, last year or something. But he's, like, he's a lifer.
Yeah, it's great.
All right. Now we've got the Velvet Underground. Boy, I mean, I love this movie.
Yeah, this is another one where it's funny to listen back to because we're just like jumping out of through the mics to talk about how much we like the movie.
I feel like since this movie came out, maybe it came out in October, something like that. I've been like grabbing everybody in the world that I run into, like by the lapels and like shaking them and like looking them and be like, you have to watch the Velvet Underground movie. It's,
Yeah.
And, I mean, we're doing a podcast about rock docs. I'm not pretending that, we're not trying to pose like we don't just love these movies.
Yes.
But boy, that one just really, really stays with me.
It's such a serious approach to the form. It just takes the idea of this being a place for experimentation and artistic expression so seriously.
Right.
It's
I mean, Todd Haynes definitely came at it from his own angle, and I mean, I think it's successful. Certainly, it wasn't designed to be the kind of thing where everybody in the world would love it. So I see some, people knocking it, and that's fine. Again, it wasn't intended to be, I don't think any of his movies are intended to be crowd pleasers that, hit every quadrant and, everybody in the world is going to come out of this thinking it was a big success.
What are the criticisms you mostly hear about it?
I mean, the criticisms I hear vary from, they blow past. I mean, the band was only together for like 4 years, and like half of that is ignored.
Yes,
the like post John Cale era is almost completely ignored.
It's basically just treated as the start of like Lou Reed's solo career.
Yeah, some of their biggest hits are hardly featured in the movie at all.
Yeah,
and that basically it's just like a history lecture about the American avant-garde in the 50s and 60s. Shoehorned into a documentary, or that it's not really a band documentary at all, that it's that it's just this excuse to talk about stuff that Todd likes
Todd's
or
into.
whatever.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I don't need just another rock. I mean, I do need another rock documentary. I'll take it. It's fine.
No, I mean, an incredibly straightforward Velvet Underground documentary that takes us through Lou Reed's long and successful post Velvet Underground career is something I would absolutely watch.
Right.
But this is a more interesting artifact to me.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's more true to what they were trying to do.
Right.
And anybody who watches this movie and doesn't fall madly in love with three people, something is wrong with them.
Yeah.
And those three people are John Cale, who's just like the uncle you want to have.
Yeah.
Maureen Tucker, who's just... Time has not dimmed her bile. She just brings it. And Jonathan Richman, who is just
what a
unbelievable.
great line for Mo Tucker. Time has not dimmed her bile.
Yeah,
well said.
She brings it. But Jonathan Richman,
yeah.
If anybody is the star of this season of Rock Docs,
to you, it's
to
Jonathan
me,
Richman. Yeah,
it's Jonathan Richman. I mean, he is. I love Jonathan Richman's music. I love his whole vibe, the whole Jonathan Richman scene.
Yeah.
Apparently, Jonathan Richman, as his other job, in addition to being a musician, builds pizza ovens and installs them. So, you know,
and there's
that's
like
cool.
very like small business, like entrepreneur photos of John Richman standing next to his products.
And he's
available online.
Yeah,
you know?
and look that up. And in interviews, he's as proud of a pizza oven that he puts together.
Yeah.
As having,
he's just an incredibly earnest guy. You can believe that just by watching him in this movie.
Yeah, as like having written and performed the song "Dancing at the Lesbian Bar" or whatever. I mean, the guy is a superstar, and he's just so lovely. I've never used that word, I don't think, to describe a person before, but that's the word that I'm going to use.
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan Richman. Does Jonathan Richman win the season?
I mean, he might be my top guy.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
mine's going to go to like Bob Dylan, probably. I don't know. If you ever
Bob
heard
Dylan's
of Bob
right.
Dylan. Yeah, I think he's
fine.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, in that same podcast episode, the Velvet Underground, which was just packed with goodies, we also did our draft.
Yes.
Any last minute regrets or thoughts about the draft, or you're still standing by your draft class?
I'm still standing by my draft class. We received a note today from Nick McCann again, dismayed that Lars Ulrich was not in the top 9 picks.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of... You could do this draft for, 10 rounds, and you wouldn't run out of people to draft.
That's true. Yeah. Addendum here. Some Kind of Monster. We've had lots of tweets have come at the Rock Docs Pod account requesting a Some Kind of Monster episode.
I'm not opposed to that.
No.
I'm in fact strongly in favor of that.
Yeah.
Having been a bit of a Metallica fan for more than 30 years.
Okay.
I can I'm into that.
All right.
Okay. So rounding it out, we've got Buena Vista Social Club.
Mm-hmm. So you basically didn't like this movie, I think would be the way to put it. Do you stand by that?
I think I may have been a little harsh.
A little harsh?
I mean, I don't know, man. Something about the mix of kind of random interviews with the music, performances, with the way the movie's structured, and then Ry Cooder's place in it sits a little funky for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe it was a little harsh.
Yeah. Well, so I think with both this and Bittersweet Motel,
yes,
I think your criticisms are in the same ballpark for both of them, which is that there's not a great deal of an arc. Now, frankly, there's more of an arc to Buena Vista Social Club.
Yeah, and it's a much better movie than Bittersweet Motel. Much better.
But I think
don't even,
the appeal to me for both of them is like, and this is part of how I watch Rock Docs, is like I don't necessarily watch each of them as I would watch like a film that I'm watching for the first time, where I'm locked into the plot. I'm trying to understand what they're doing for characters and motifs and themes. In Rock Docs, I feel like you can kind of just lock into a moment And if that moment is sufficiently interesting musically, that can be enough. Or if there's a little talking head segment that's funny or charming, that can be enough. It's like a series of shorts. And that's the way I watch Buena Vista Social Club now. And I think the Ry Cooder stuff does sit a little funny, but the series of shorts aspect to it, where each performance is good and lots of the interviews with the Cuban musicians are themselves very interesting, like individually. They don't necessarily amount to much more than the sum of the parts, but I like them each individually, and so the movie works for me that way.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, look, I have fun. If I think about the movie, if I'm just walking down the street and you're like, hey, Buena Vista Hotel, what comes to mind, like, in that second? Like, I'm thinking about not just the musical performance, and the music we've all acknowledged is always great, but yeah, Ibrahim Ferrer, with his shrine, Compa Segundo, talking about how he's 90 years old, he has like 5 kids, but he's not done. So look out, ladies.
His hangover cure.
His hangover cure is fantastic. His
smoking cigarettes since he was 5.
yeah, exactly. Playing the piano for a ballet class. I mean, there's a lot
all
of
of those things are great, right?
Even at the very beginning, where they're like, "Where was the Buena Vista Social Club?" And they're driving around.
Different
Havana.
people on the streets are like, "No, it's there. It's a house now." Like, that's great stuff. That's great stuff, even if it doesn't build to a fulfilling payoff.
All right, you're talking me into the merits of this movie, which I may have. I think this movie's reputation over the last 20 years as, like, if you're gonna watch one music documentary, which you shouldn't because they're all bad, but this one happens to be good. I think that doesn't sit well with me. I think that the
Ry Cooder thing definitely plays different now than it did 20 years ago. No question about
the
that.
white savior, thing,
and the
again,
poverty porn too is certainly like something that's made me a little uneasy watching it.
Yeah, I just feel like Wim Wenders didn't really put it together in a way. He could have put it together in a way, I think, maybe that was a little more coherent, a little more satisfying. And everybody in the world seems to disagree with me, so, clearly I'm the idiot here. But, I may have been a little harsh.
Okay.
Speaking of a little harsh, let's talk about our season finale, Bittersweet Motel.
Yes. All right, so first of all, thanks again to Rob Mitchum. Really brought the heat.
It's not his fault that was the movie we watched to round out the season.
Yeah. Well, so I feel like I let the movie down, the Fish community down, in my defense of it. I feel incomplete about letting you guys get away with saying that this movie sucks, basically. So
go on.
Well, this is not altogether different than my defense of Buena Vista Social Club, but basically the idea of a rewatchable, right? Which is made popular by the podcast Rewatchables by Bill Simmons.
Producer now of many a rock doc.
Now a rock doc producer.
Certainly a key element in the rock doc cinematic universe.
Yeah. Is that, like, it's a movie that when it's on cable, you can throw it on and be like, oh, okay, they're about to, Andy's about to play the record for the entire prison yard before he gets thrown in the hole for 2 weeks in Shawshank or whatever.
Sure.
And, like,
okay.
I'll sit down and watch this for 8 minutes before the next commercial break.
Right.
When then I'll get back to my yard work or whatever.
Mm-hmm. I also don't care for Shawshank Redemption, but that's okay.
I'm sure that's true. But that's the theory of a rewatchable. It's like, you've seen it so many times, you throw it on.
Right.
You
don't have to think about it a lot.
You don't need to think about it a lot. You don't need to watch the whole movie. And there's enough scenes that if you catch it at any point, you can knock out 20 minutes of it and it's good.
Sure.
Like, Bittersweet Motel was that for me in my high school and college years.
Right.
In the dorm rooms that I was, like, living in, it was always on.
Okay.
And you could always walk past a dorm room and be like, oh, it's about to be the weird frat guys in the tent shotgunning beers. It's about to be, oh my God, they're about to play Tweezer on New Year's Eve. Oh, this is about to be the debut of Roses Are Free after they rehearse it backstage, and Mike Gordon's too messed up to participate. Those like all that like it's like these series of moments and scenes that I have no doubt is more important to me as a Phish fan than it is to anyone else. And I can't imagine having that relationship with it unless you've already seen it 25 times. So seeing it one time probably doesn't give you that experience, but 2 times doesn't give you that experience. But for me, like when I watch it, I have a dumb smile on my face throughout the whole movie, and I get excited at each scene change about what I'm about to see. And so on the rewatchables theory of rock docs, this to me is, in spite of its flaws, which I mostly concede in its construction that you pointed out, I think it's okay because I think the footage that they have is good and compelling enough to warrant the 80 minutes that it is.
Okay.
What I would like for you to respond to rather than what I just said.
Yeah.
We didn't actually let you go on much, but you said that the music in it actually made you like Phish more than you typically do. Talk about that, David.
I think, as all journalists do, you've misquoted me.
I said more than you typically do.
No. I thought the music, I enjoyed the music in the movie more than I thought I was going to.
Mm-hmm.
I go into every movie, rock doc or otherwise, in good faith.
Yeah.
We might talk about our backgrounds a little bit as we get into this.
Yeah.
A little bit. But, you know, I studied film criticism and whatever, blah, 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 a million years ago. And I think sometimes when I talk to people, and they know what my background or something for whatever that, like everybody had to study something in college who went to college. And I think sometimes people think that I, you know, go into a movie with my critic hat on, looking for things not to like or that are not going to measure up to my standards. Mm-hmm. But that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I never in my life have walked into a movie theater or turned on a movie and thought to myself, I would like to have a bad time now. Like, I want to enjoy everything. I don't know. That's just how I'm oriented. I don't like put on a song and think I'm not going to like it or a show or whatever, or go to a movie or go to a concert. That's not my vibe. That doesn't seem like fun to me. So, you know, even though I previously have not particularly enjoyed a lot of the Phish music that I've been exposed to, I went into this movie in good faith, and I was pleasantly surprised with the music. But maybe my expectations were not super high. Mm-hmm. I didn't expect to like fall in love with it and like run out and join the Phish, tape trader community.
Well, what did you like about it?
Well, I do think, like I said, Steve Hyden's framing of it as like, this is just classic rock, man.
Yeah.
Which is a, reductive version of his more thoughtful argument in his book, is probably true. Yeah. I mean, I think the choices of what music to feature in the movie were probably aimed towards somebody who's just more of a general music fan versus a hardcore Phish head.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
I think I came on a little bit too strong because I like all of these songs and I can understand the appeal of choosing, some ballads and some rockers and some covers, which he did. That's a sensible place to go to put people in. And I think he probably that's what he liked.
Yeah.
But I think even if you were going in as a hardcore Phish fan, that might be a more reasonable place to go for a general audience than to like play a fluffhead.
Yeah. Okay. I don't even know what a fluffhead is, but I take your word for it. Yeah. I mean, if I was like, whatever, if I had all the power in the universe, I could pick out things about Phish that bother me.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, if Trey had like a 10% stronger voice and they did one more pass of their lyrics, like it would be helpful to me in terms of enjoying their music more, but okay, whatever. Mm-hmm. Taking it for what it is, I didn't like, I wasn't watching the parts of the movie where they're playing music for the most part and being like, I want to fast forward through it.
Yeah.
I just was like, all right, this is all right,
Yeah.
So whatever. I mean, but just still, my criticism of the movie stands, which is I think it's a dud.
Yeah.
And going back to your theory about like the rewatchables, like, part of this is like, we love this form of rock docs.
Yeah.
And part of it is rewatching them,
Yeah.
right? You got your old favorites. And anytime for this podcast or just in general, I watch one that I hadn't seen before, I want to fall in love with it. And I want it to be like another one that I'm going to be like, yeah, man, like I'm going to just, what am I going to watch tonight? Hey, I'm going to throw on Beats, Rhymes, and Life. That's great. I love it. Most of the documentaries that we talked about this season fall into that category for me. Either they have been for years or, they're newly on that list.
Yeah.
Some of them I may, the Tina Turner one, I don't know how much domestic abuse content I want to watch like on a particular day, but the musical content of it is so tremendous. But Bittersweet Motel, I just was like, where's the escape hatch? And I do feel like we talked about there could be a better movie in there. Yeah. And it's, but I have to be honest to the audience and review the rock doc as it is. And I don't want to just like something because, I want to like everything.
All right. My last point on this is there was one other thing in that episode that we didn't get to that was consistent with what we were talking about. When they walk into the gun shop, Trey says to Mike, "What did you think of the show last night?" And Mike says, I kind of thought you were going off, playing way too many notes. And Trey says, yeah, but you always say that. And Mike says, yeah, I think that's because you always play too many notes.
Yeah.
And that conversation is so in line with what we were talking about, and what the band was going through in that transition period in 97 and 98. Trey pulling back and it becoming the jams being driven by all four of them playing at once, locked in and listening to each other. And so
but you don't get that in the movie.
No,
you just
I
get
know. This is consistent with Rob's version of what the movie could have been.
Right.
And we just never got to that segment. And that's also a part that me and my friends talk about all the time. Whenever we go to a show where Trey plays too many notes, we do that scene.
Which
on
is
the way
every
out.
fish.
It's a lot of fish shows. He had a great fall. Trey had a great fall.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that one's just not a rewatchable for me. I don't know. I stand by my position, but I respect your argument.
All right.
That's season 1, kind of in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
What else do we want to discuss here?
All right. So one thing I wanted to get to is sort of under the hood. How are we choosing what we listen to?
There's a scientific process.
Yeah. So the gist is we have a giant spreadsheet within which there are basically every documentary that we've ever thought of considering putting in this show. Right?
We have
way long. It would be 15 seasons before we got them all.
I think there's like easily 150 documentaries on this list, and it's growing all the time because they keep dropping more of these things,
and people keep recommending them to us. Yeah.
So we
have a massive list. We try to go through, and we sort of the season idea works well because we try to think of like the 10 episode season in like being diverse in multiple ways, covering different genres of music, men and women, white people and black people, trying to make sure we're not just doing 10 episodes of 70s rock white dudes.
Right, exactly. Which, I mean, that...
There's a lot of those movies.
There's a lot of those movies.
You could do 100 episodes of this show covering nothing but 70s classic rock.
Yeah, and I grew up listening to 70s classic rock. Yeah. No knock on that. It doesn't necessarily reflect what I listen to now as much. But in terms of... I mean, I do listen to that, but it's, a wider spread.
I mean, I just think the show would get repetitive if we were talking about nothing but that every episode.
Yeah. Oh, there's another documentary about Tom Petty. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't do anything in this season about jazz. Right. There's quite a few jazz documentaries that I really like. There's whole other genres and worlds of music. I mean, other than Buena Vista Social Club, it was all pretty much American. Do we do any British bands even? Maybe. No. So it was pretty much down the road, pretty much American, soul, R&B, hip hop, and rock.
Tina's like an honorary Brit. this point, right?
She lives in Switzerland.
Okay,
so
she's not. She's not
Swiss.
an honorary Brit.
Not
at
an
all.
honorary Brit at all.
Yeah.
But didn't she record What's Love Got to Do with It? Was that in?
Yeah.
By the way, that was a really good scene.
Yes.
I just want to go back. I don't even think I talked about it in the Tina thing, but like there's footage of her recording What's Love Got to Do with It in the studio.
Yeah.
And they go back and they interview the songwriter and how he convinced her to like understand the vibe of this song, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
I just want to
Good.
stick a pin in that.
And then also when we invite guests in, we like to offer them up that they choose one. So
Right.
Candace and Jeff chose Hype, which
Yeah.
which wasn't even on our list.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, and
Yeah.
we love that movie. So we do plan to have more guests on in more seasons, and we do plan to ask them what they would like to.
Yeah, we have one guest who I'm not going to reveal for whatever reason already lined up for season 2, and she's chosen a documentary that is going to be a little bit outside of the bounds of some of the other things we've talked about, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, season 2 is taking shape. We can reveal. Our people have told us we're allowed to reveal that the first episode of season 2 will be about Get Back, which we've got a lot of demand for.
Yes. So we've sort of, this is the fall that this has been airing in. There's been a lot of rock doc news.
Yeah, big rock doc,
big
fall.
releases, big news, and so basically everyone in America was watching Get Back during Thanksgiving break and the week.
We were
after.
talking about Hype,
and we were talking about Hype. So we'll be right on the zeitgeist a month and a half later. We'll have an episode of Get Back, but you know what? I'm okay with that. Let's no hot takes. We're gonna sit with it. We're gonna let our impressions cool. It's like the Senate considers itself the simmering saucepan.
Sure.
Of Congress. That's where we are.
That we're the simmering saucepan of rock talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, people have said like, well, I guess you're going to talk about this, that, and the other, and it's like, well, first of all, we just have like other things in our lives, so we just don't jump on the mic the second something comes out. But yeah, I mean, this is intended to be evergreen content with a long tail,
right?
And there's corporate synergy involved. And if you saw the whole picture, you would understand.
Yeah.
We might do a SPAC. We might do an NFT. There's a lot of things we're going to do.
A lot of NFTs on coming down the pipe. The other thing that people mention all the time is they seem to pick up on the fact that I reference the Tom Petty doc and the Eagles doc every episode.
Yes.
And it is true that those are like my two favorite movies ever made.
Yes.
And that I've watched each of them hundreds of times. But we don't want to just do all of like the biggest rock docs ever in the first 5 episodes. We gotta save that stuff. We gotta keep some stuff back.
Yeah.
So we'll
dose
drip
them
that
out.
stuff out. We'll dose that stuff out.
If you're looking for, the history of the Eagles, it's coming.
Yeah.
It'll come eventually.
It'll
Long
be here.
Strange Trip.
Yeah. We'll do Long Strange Trip.
It'll
We'll
get
do
there.
History of the Eagles. We'll
get
do
there.
Running Down a Dream.
Yeah. It's all going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
People also asked, who the hell are these two idiots?
Yeah. We blew right
question we get a
past
lot.
that. We were so excited to talk about Van Dorf in episode 1 that we skipped over talking about ourselves at all.
So now that it's the season 1 wrap up, but we've going on for more than an hour.
Yeah.
Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah. Yes. So we're friends. We live together in the same neighborhood here in San Diego.
We're not actually roommates.
No, we're not roommates. We both have families and kids who like to play together. And while the kids play, we mostly stand off to the side and talk about rock docs.
Yes.
And at some point, we were like, "Well, this should just be a show."
Yes, that is the origin story.
The origin story. So I'm a journalist in San Diego. I work for a website called Voice of San Diego. Cover San Diego City Hall and local politics, that sort of thing.
And I'm an attorney and intellectual property and business law. And we both, like I said, I studied film. I played in a bunch of bands.
Yeah, played in a lot of
played
bands.
music from time to time. Enjoy that. And we both go to a lot of shows.
Yeah,
a lot of concerts. Sometimes together, sometimes apart. We just we like rock talks, man.
Yeah, I joked about this in the first episode, but it is pretty true that you, as a many-time band member and a film critic, have a much clearer CV in terms of what you bring to this show than I do.
Yeah, but you actually like do research and know how to interview people and do all these other things for your job that have nothing to do with what I do.
Yeah, fair enough. But yes, so if anybody is listening to this, we do have a musician on this show.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we've got an award-winning musician and an award-winning journalist. So please, save us your hot takes, people.
All
right. So yeah, season 1 wrapped up. Season 2 announcement coming soon. Check us out, Rock Docs Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and I think Facebook and various other places. Thanks a lot again to everybody who's listened. This is clearly something that we enjoy doing, but it's also nice that we get nice feedback from people, and people are listening and giving us reviews and iTunes and things like that. That's been so far. People have had nice things to say. Feel free to continue doing that. If there is a rock doc that we haven't yet discussed, but you really want us to, for good, bad, or otherwise, please shout us out. We'd love to hear it.
Yep.
There you go. Season 1, Rock Docs.